My name's Monica Dux and I'm an author. So my latest book is Lapsed, and it is about being a lapsed Catholic or a former Catholic or an ex-Catholic or a recovering Catholic, because I think people who are brought up Catholic or have some relationship to the Catholic Church tend to find it hard to describe themselves when they walk away, and I was one of those people. So the book is about growing up in a religious world. It's about losing your religion. It's about trying to come to terms with what that religion meant. And Catholicism for me was something that had become quite fraught, and for a lot of former Catholics, I think something that we struggle with, trying to understand what it was all about, particularly in light of the abuse that the church has perpetrated on generations of children. And so I sort of set out on a quest trying to work out what had shadowed me as a Catholic, whether that had formed my identity, what my responsibility was to my former religion, and to understand a little bit more about this strange thing that I'd been brought up with. Because I felt for years I was reading all these books where people who had been brought up Catholic would write these really funny things about nuns, for instance. And it's like, that's funny, but, well, who are nuns? I mean, nuns are extremes. They're always, good or bad or, quirky or flying. And there's all these different ways that we look at a whole lot of these things, and we can laugh at them. But I thought, well, why? Why are they? Why is it like that? And then why did I want to be a nun, for instance? At the age of 12, I desperately wanted to be a nun. So why did I want to unsex myself, live a life of chastity and poverty and obedience? What was it that attracted me to that? And also it was triggered by my daughter, who decided when she was 6 on a family trip to Rome that she wanted to be Catholic. And at the time, I think she was confusing Santa Claus with Jesus Christ. And so I was quite confronted by this. I found her praying in this church and she was like, "Is this how you do it?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." And I'd really made an effort to bring my children up without religion. And I was a very secular family, and we talked about different religions, but I hadn't actually given them God. And all of a sudden, my daughter wanted God, and she wanted a Catholic God. And that, for me, was quite confronting. And that's when I thought, I have to look at this, and I want to examine this, and I want to work out what that was all about. And I suppose, so it was a journey following her journey of belief, but also for me trying to say, well, what is it to be lapsed? And once you've sort of figured that out, what do you do about it? Oh, forever. Ever my whole life. I started thinking about writing a book like this many years ago, and it was because I was very Catholic. People would laugh at my Catholic humour, and I would make a lot of Virgin Mary jokes, and it was just one of these things that was always so much a part of how I expressed myself. And so I was very curious about it. And then when the incident happened in Rome with my daughter, I thought, I'm gonna write this book. And it took a long time. It was probably about 6 years, really, by the time from real conception to the end. And it wasn't easy, because it's funny, when you write about something like the Catholic Church, you're writing about the history of Western civilization. It was very, very difficult for me to say, well, I've got this huge, because there's a lot of history in the book, and there's a lot of theology, and there's a lot of trying to understand what this huge 2,000 years of history is about and how it related to me. But now I look back, I was getting a bit impatient, I guess, with whether I was going to actually end up writing this book as I wanted to. And I'm relieved now it took so long, because it really did give me a lot more of a sense of the longer history of it. I got to follow my daughter's journey. And of course, in between, there was a whole lot of scandals that were popping up with various luminaries of the Catholic Church. And that was interesting too, to see how I'd already gone down this journey of trying to understand my own Catholicism, and I kept having these abuse revelations, and so it took me quite some time. No, it's not. It's I co-authored a book with Zora Simic on feminism back in 2008 when I was young. My second book was on pregnancy, and it was about my own journey as a pregnant woman, and it was very much about my body. And so in some ways, and it was a funny book, and I wanted this book, my Catholic book, to be a funny book. And it was a similar thing I did where I think I tried to bring it back to my own experience, whereas my pregnancy book was about my body and trying to understand what it was to have a baby in 21st century. That was done through talking about what happened to my body. In this book, I think this is sort of what happened to my soul, and I've tried to unpick that and see, well, what's the bigger tale there? Oh, I've always written. I think it's just if you're someone who likes to express yourself, and I think most people have something to say, and I've always been very talkative and creative, and I think writing is a very a good way to contain your thoughts and to understand the world. And it's funny, I've often written things like strong memories, and then I will go back a few years later and I realise I don't remember those things. It's as if there's an unpacking that takes place when you write. But I get very angry at the world sometimes, and I'm very curious about things, and I think I find absurdity is something that in the world is something that I'm very fascinated by. And for me, writing is a way to sort of share that. I think that's what, there's lots of different ways that we all write, but for me, it's really, I want to have a conversation with people about things that matter. This is where I weep. Oh, it was so awful. It was hard. It was okay. So my kids were at home for homeschooling, which is just a lie. It was more like Minecraft. That was challenging because I was trying to finish the book, and I had a really good head of steam. And as a writer, you spend so much time alone, and it's very isolating. And what really helps with writing is getting out and talking to people and having conversations. And so, of course, I was still doing that on Zoom. Just wasn't the same. And I think there was a monotony to last year for everyone. But I think for writers, it was particularly challenging because it was very hard sometimes to shake off what you were doing. I mean, in the end, it was okay. And I think if I'd been starting my book, it would have been a lot harder. But it wasn't a good year. It was okay. I mean, now we're all looking back on it fondly in a way, aren't we? It was quiet. I did scream a lot at my children, yeah. And when they were in that short lockdown recently, and I remembered the sounds of my office door opening and going, "Go away!" And I started hiding food. That's the other thing. From them, because they would just want to eat all day. So yeah, that was my writing year. Yeah, very productive. I am, yeah. I have been for many years now, which is sort of a curse, really, isn't it? I mean, So yeah, I do. I'm at home writing. My husband's a writer. He's a screenwriter. So we pretty much have worked together for many years. I decided to become a writer when I first met him, and he seemed to have this wonderful life of, like, he could go out for coffee when he wanted, and so it's sort of his fault. Oh, I have a few, actually. I mean, I spent a few years pretty much reading a lot about Jesus, and some of that stuff's fascinating. Reza Aslan's Zealot, which is about Jesus, essentially, as a historical figure. I really loved that, and I revisited that as I was doing the book. But other than actually my book research, which took up a lot of time, and I have a very interesting library now, last year what I really loved, and I know that she mentioned me when she did hers, but Jacinta Parsons' Unseen, I thought was just such an outstanding and important read, and I adored that. Last year when it came out, I was very excited to. I think what Jacinta did so beautifully was she told her story in a way that it was like having a wonderful conversation with her, and it's really hard to do that with memoir, and particularly for something which was so painful for her. And I thought it was just perfectly pitched. Another book I read last year, which I really adored, which is very old, of course, Mary Carr's The Liars Club. And so I did a lot of memoir reading last year when I was writing my own, and just to see how far do people go, what are people willing to do and what are they getting away with? And because there's all the issue of ethics with memoir writing, and I find, Merrick's The Liars Club is such a classic, but there is a moment at the end of her book where she tells a secret but doesn't tell a secret about her extended family, and I thought that is just absolutely perfect memoir. So that was my last year. Mr. Men, who wrote the Mr. Men? Enid Blyton, I think the first book I actually read was A Famous Five, like most of, so many people. Look, for me, probably as a teenager, as a early teen, Dostoevsky, I remember reading Crime and Punishment and being so excited by this book. And if I look back at my high school years, the things that really made me read were Penguin classics. It's funny, but they had those lovely spines, and they had these beautiful little introductions about the book. They would have, some English scholar or Russian scholar or something would write an essay about what you're about to read. And I was really excited by those because I remember you'd read the book and then you'd read this way of understanding the book. And I didn't grow up, my parents never went to university. We didn't have a lot of books in my house, but I would go and buy myself a Penguin classic. And so I think as a teenager, Crime and Punishment was the thing that made me so excited about, a story that I haven't revisited it because I'm a bit scared that it might be like, I know it's a classic. It's not like it's Crime and Punishment. Oh, I'm going to have a breakdown and I'm going to go to bed for months. No, don't put that in. No, what is next for me? Oh, I actually, when I was doing the book, it was like when I had my last child, where I kept saying to my husband, don't ever let me have another child. We're never having another child. And when I was doing this book, I loved doing this book, but it was a real disemboweling and it was very hard and it took a lot of time, and I really put a lot into it, and I thought, it takes so much to write a book. I have ideas of things I would like to keep writing, but I do feel quite, I feel a bit shattered by last year. So no, there will be things, who knows? That was an absolute pleasure. Read the book. Please read the book.